Welcome, everybody. The Natural Resources Committee of the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County welcomes you to our second Evergreen Tuesday. Wildfires, soaring summer temperatures, and not to mention erratic winds and heavy rainstorms and mudslides. Climate change impacts are affecting us daily, especially the urban areas. We would like to share with you not only a call to action, but some positive thoughts and activities for improving our futures. Ben Thompson last Tuesday spoke to the benefits of preserving and planting a substantial urban tree canopy, as well as the opportunities now offered under the recently funded Evergreen Community Act. That conversation will soon be available at our League's YouTube site. Tonight, Lisa Dulude, manager of the Office of Energy and Sustainability for Snohomish County, and our own League past president, Kate Lunsford, will offer you some ideas of model programs that can move us towards sustainability. These ideas are aimed at you, the concerned individual, property owner, gardener, community leader, citizen. A few housekeeping reminders: set your view image to speaker. You will be muted. Put your questions into the chat as they occur. Lisa will answer at the end during the question and answer period. At that time, signal your questions by the hand raise feature on your Zoom screen under reactions. And now a few words of welcome from our current League president, Jean Crevier.
Thank you, Joan, and good evening, everyone. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that for nearly 102 years has encouraged the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and we influence public policy through education and advocacy. As far back as the 1920s, the League has acted upon its concern for the conservation of natural resources when it studied flood control and erosion. A continuation of that work is tonight's discussion on the Healthy Forest Initiative. Thank you for being with us and for being interested in protecting and preserving the environment that provides for us all. We acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, in particular the Tulalip, Snohomish, Stillaguamish, and Sauk Suiattle tribes. We see you, we respect your right to sovereignty and self-determination, and we are committed to being better listeners and learners as we support lifting Indigenous voices. Thank you for respecting the First Peoples of this land.
Thank you, Jean. Tonight we welcome Lisa Dulude. She joined Snohomish County in April of 2010. In her role as Energy and Sustainability Manager, she oversees the Office of Energy and Sustainability, which furthers the county's environmental sustainability goals through policy, planning, and programs. In the last 11 years, she has spearheaded several new initiatives, such as the first Sustainable Operations Action Plan, the Zero Waste Fair Initiative. If you've been to the Evergreen Fair, you can appreciate that. The Green and High Performance Building Ordinance, and the Resource Conservation Program. Lisa also started two new innovative community financing programs, the Energy Smart Loan Program and the Savvy Septic Program. Prior to joining the county, Lisa worked in the private sector as a consultant in both environmental planning and in environmental health and safety. She holds a master's degree in urban design and planning from the University of Washington in Seattle, and is a certified sustainable building advisor and a certified building operator. Welcome, Lisa.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Joan, and thank you to the League of Women Voters in Snohomish County so much for having me. I really appreciate all of the great work that your organization does, and love speaking with you, and thank you for inviting me to this event. So I am here today to talk to you about the Snohomish County Healthy Forest Project, for those of you that aren't familiar with it yet. And as Joan said, I am in the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources at the county, and our Office of Energy and Sustainability is one of the divisions or offices in that department. So what is the Healthy Forest Project? So this is actually a partnership between the county and nonprofit Forterra. And I think a lot of you are familiar with Forterra. They're an advocacy agency for a lot of different environmental initiatives, but Healthy Forests being one of them. And this project really focuses on forest restoration and in particular urban forest restoration. And it uses a community stewardship model. So that's really a central and key component of the whole program, which I'll talk more about in a second. So Forterra has had an existing program before we partnered with them and launched our own program in the county. And that's called the Green City Partnerships Program. And I just put a few facts about their program here on the screen, as well as a map of their existing partnerships in this program. And we need to add Snohomish County on there and have a big green county there at the top. But they have 12 active green cities. We were the first county, and I think are still the only county to join in the program. They're serving well over 1.3 million people with a combined goal of restoring close to 10,000 acres. And they've to date, and this is probably a little out of date from Forterra's slides, but over 2,000 acres are currently in restoration, and they have logged more than 1.23 million volunteer hours since 2005, which was when they first started the program. So what are some of the goals of the Healthy Forest Project? So in real simple terms, we want to improve the health of urban forests and natural areas. We really want to galvanize an informed and involved community. And we want to ensure long-term sustainability, both of our forests and for this program. So as I mentioned before, community stewardship is a key to the program's success. So one of the things that this program does is it trains Forterra and some of our county staff will come out and actually train folks that want to be a lead steward. And lead stewards will get the training and the tools that they need to host their own volunteer work parties. And then, volunteers can come and join one or more work parties as they wish. But the idea is that the lead stewards are really helping to launch and accelerate the pace of restoration in our different pilot areas. And I think you might recognize a few folks in the work party picture, because that was our launch event for the Healthy Forest Project in January of 2020, right before the pandemic started. So I think, this group is really well informed of what the urban forest benefits are. So obviously, clean air and clean water. They provide really great benefits in terms of water retention and erosion control, and can actually provide a really great amount of water quality treatment. Wildlife or habitat for local wildlife, recreation, access, education opportunities. They can really increase property values and provide an avenue to revitalize neighborhoods. Obviously, greenhouse gas reduction is a big one, and carbon sequestration. And then I think the big thing that we've seen with COVID is that we are more dependent than ever on outdoor spaces for our mental and physical health. Where COVID, we really have not been able to gather indoors. Our parks, our urban parks in particular, are a huge asset to our communities. Some of the urban forest challenges, and again, I'm sure this group is well versed in a lot of what I'm talking about, but this is an actual picture of Kayak Point Park right on the water. If you guys have been there, there's some really great forests in Kayak Point Park. And this was taken last summer, but it's getting overrun by English ivy. And at some point, this starts to, invasive species start to strangle trees and really start to impinge their growth and their health. So we need to get in there, and volunteers are one of the best ways that we have to keep up with this work. Get in there and start removing invasive species. And where possible, planting new trees. And we have a bunch of opportunity to do that at our pilot sites, which I'll talk about in a minute. Invasive species also prevent large conifers from reestablishing themselves. And it will also make native trees that are near the end of their life might struggle to regenerate. And it can lead to fragmentation and a decline in forest canopy. So this is a dramatization image, but this is, over time, sort of the slow degrading or degradation of a forested area if it's not well maintained, if we don't get in there and remove invasive species. And on the sort of the opposite view, this is a dramatization as well. But if we're really active in maintaining forest health, thinning where appropriate, removing invasive species, ensuring that new seedlings can grow, we will see the healthy forests and that long-term growth that we really want. So with Snohomish County Healthy Forest Project, we have 10 pilot sites. And I know this is really hard to see on this map, but the county is a huge scale. You're welcome to go to the Healthy Forest Project website and check out this map yourself. But the 10 pilot sites are all county park or county owned land. They're actually all park sites. So Kayak Point Park, Portage Creek Wildlife Area, Meadowdale Beach Park, Smith Island, Picnic Point Park, McCollum Park, Lake Stickney Park, Lord Hill Regional Park, and that's where we just had a big Healthy Forest Project celebration event a few weeks ago. The Evergreen State Fairgrounds and Paradise Valley Conservation Area. And these sites were all selected because the Healthy Forest Project is also part of the county's Puget Sound Initiative. So all of the sites selected are adjacent to a water body and salmon-bearing stream, if we could find that opportunity. And the reason there is we looked at the amount of benefit that we could get by working to restore some of these forested areas, knowing that it really has a lot of additional co-benefits for water quality and for salmon. And that was one of the executive's priorities when he took office. So some of the work that we've done so far, we've picked our 10 pilot sites, and before we started work in those areas, we hired a sub-consultant through our work with Forterra to conduct forest health assessments. So that sub-consultant has sort of a matrix of the value of the forest and the canopy and the species that are there compared to the threat, which is basically invasive species cover. And so these are just two examples of the management unit areas and how they were coded by those forestry experts. But you can see here, Kayak Point property on the left has a lot of that dark green, which means that it has really high value and actually, for the most part, pretty low threat for invasive species. But there are some spots where we're starting to see a little bit more invasive species creep in. And then there at Lake Stickney on the right, that map shows that we actually have sort of a lot of the area that really is struggling with invasive species cover. You'll see the dark purple color, that sort of orangey red color, and a lime green color. And we've seen that when we've been out there. There's some really great tree stands, but a lot of ivy and a lot of other invasive species that are really threatening the health of that forested park. And here's a few other pieces of data that we got from those health assessments. And there's a lot more information that we received that I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But of all the 10 park sites, if we look at them cumulatively, there's about 46% coverage with low invasive species cover. about 32% with medium invasive cover, and 22% with high invasive cover. And then the chart on the right categorizes the dominant overstory species. So primary, secondary, and tertiary. And so you can sort of see the spread. And again, this is across all of the 10 different sites that we've chosen. We didn't survey the entire park for every pilot site. But what we did see is that we have a lot of Doug fir, quite a bit of Western red cedar, a good amount of alder, and then actually a good amount of big leaf maple. And Western hemlock and black cottonwood are on the lower end for our pilot areas. And so one of the things that we are very close to publishing is it's pretty much done, and we just need to finalize a few things and get this plan out. But we used a lot of the findings from the forest health assessment, as well as the work that Forterra has done with different green cities throughout the region to publish a 20-year plan. How are we going? What is our approach to keeping these 10 pilot areas healthy? What are the resources that we need? How much do we think it will cost, both in terms of volunteer participation and actual dollars? There is quite a bit of restoration work that isn't suitable for volunteers. And I'll show you some pictures of that here in a minute. But this is really going to be our roadmap for ensuring long-term success of keeping these areas, 10 pilot areas, healthy. So I will definitely send Joan and the League of Women Voters a note once this plan is ready for viewing, for reading. So here's just a quick overview of what we've done so far and sort of a timeline of the Healthy Forest Project. So as I mentioned, we had a kickoff event in January of 2020 at McCollum Park. We had sort of an open house where Forterra gave a presentation, and it was followed by a volunteer effort where we installed 53 plants, trees and shrubs, with really great success. And then in March of 2020, COVID hit. And unfortunately, we really had to put the program on pause, at least all of the volunteer work. So during that time, we had the sub-consultant complete that forest health assessment, as I mentioned. And Forterra and the county really focused on developing that 20-year plan. And then luckily this summer, we decided to resume events, and people were really the community was looking for outdoor events and ways that they could get involved. So we held our first event at Lake Stickney. The picture on the right there is actually one of Lake Stickney, and our volunteers removing ivy. I was out there as well. And interestingly enough, a tree fell not too far from where we were that day. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but that's the first time that it happened to me. And then in July, we hosted another volunteer event at Picnic Point, again, removing invasive species. In October, just a few weeks ago, we had the Healthy Forest Celebration event at Lord Hill Regional Park. And we had a great turnout, and volunteers planted over 250 trees right along the Snohomish River there where salmon were spawning. So those were almost all conifers that will really provide great bank stabilization, great shading, erosion control, and eventually, some large woody debris for salmon spawning. And again, that's sort of the idea with trying to think about where we invest our resources with the pilot areas and trying to get multiple co-benefits. November 13th, we had an event at Meadowdale Beach Park. And then November 18th, we're hosting a virtual open house for anyone that's interested in learning a little bit more about the program, perhaps becoming a lead steward and leading work parties. So I mentioned a little bit about professional crews. So there's a lot more to this program than a lot of people realize. We often do have to send in, the county has Washington conservation crews that do a lot of fantastic work for us, that have to go in and prep a site before volunteers can go in and work. So we might clear, for an example, with the Lord Hill planting that we just had, the WCC crews came in and did a ton of clearing of blackberry bushes and digging and removing them, things that generally volunteers aren't up for doing, to ensure that we could plant all of those conifers along the bank with success. And then you can also see some of the other work that is sometimes needed, you know, in order to make forested areas accessible, planting, putting in steps and trails, etc. And then you can even, you know, we haven't done this yet at the county, but we could even look at stormwater detention ponds or perimeters of county-owned sites for tree planting. Because again, we're trying to find as much room as we can to both remove invasive species, but also to plant new trees. So this is just sort of a piece of the pie, but it also takes quite a bit of coordination from Forterra and the county to ensure that we get everybody, all of our volunteers registered, that everybody is, you know, safe, and that we count the hours of volunteer hours that we get through the community. Also we want to keep track of the acres of forested area that we've addressed in terms of invasive species removal, trees planted. Again, we want to be working towards metrics and really seeing how much we can accomplish by tracking some of these metrics. So so those are just a few of the forms that we use in order to track the metrics. So that example there on the right. And these are just a few pictures of different volunteers. The city of Everett does have their own program. These aren't actual volunteers from one of our events, but we can also start putting up, and we have started putting up signs in front of some of our seedlings and trees that we've planted to ensure they don't get trampled or stepped on. That's also caring for the plants, making sure they're irrigated for several years, is also a big part of this program. So you don't just plant a tree and walk away. There's a lot of care that goes into it afterwards. Sometimes we even stake off areas that we've planted to make sure that, you know, those trees can survive. And this is a picture from our most recent planting event at Lord Hill. So you can see some of the trees that were planted there, and just behind the bigger trees in the background is the river. And we actually saw a ton of salmon that were done spawning and were dying essentially and heading back, putting all their nutrients back into the river. So one of the other things that I will say is, you know, we had a 2-year contract with Forterra. So we're coming up at the end of our second year in December here for their work with this. And luckily funding was approved in 2022 to continue the program. So we're really excited. We think this is a wonderful community program, and our hope is that it will grow over time and that we can get other cities to join and perhaps expand our 10 pilot areas to other areas throughout the county. So that's really all I have. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions, but you can learn more on our website, snowcohealthyforest.org, and that's the joint program website between Forterra and the county. And Forterra has just been a wonderful partner in all of this. So,
Kate, do you want to ask your question outright?
Sure. Yeah, I just wondered if you'd had much, now that COVID has loosened things up a little bit, have you had any success in getting school administration, school districts involved in promoting student activities with this project?
We haven't really had any schools or school districts express interest yet. And I think a lot of that is we really just in the last couple of months, like I said, started ramping the program back up again. I mean, we were on pause for so long and we couldn't even have groups bigger than 6. You'll remember for a while there with even outdoors. So I think that will be a great area of potential in the future. We did have a Boy Scouts group that's really interested in just a volunteer event. We have Boeing that's interested in a volunteer event for their workers, which is fantastic. I think the thing that we need more interest in, we're starting to see a few people sign up, is to be those lead stewards, because the county in Forterra doesn't have the staff capacity to lead all the work party events, volunteer events that we really need to get to where we want to be in terms of forest health in these different areas. But we've actually seen a ton of interest just in the last couple of months since we sort of pressed the restart button post COVID on this. But yeah, I think that's a great question, Kate. And schools, this would be a really great program for schools to get involved in.
Lisa, in terms of hours that volunteers give to this project, is there a breakdown of when you have an event, a planting event, of approximately how much time is involved for the volunteers? I mean, a lot of times people are willing to do it if they know, oh, it's 3 hours on Saturday, join us, that sort of thing. Is there a breakdown that kind of shows that kind of work?
Well, we have tracked, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we do track the volunteer hours. So, and we generally just say if they come to an event, sign up for an event, it's usually no more than a 3-hour event at the most. Because oftentimes this is hard work and you're either out in the rain or out in the heat. And, we have some folks that can really be out there for a long time. And we have some people that really just want to be out there for an hour, and that's fine. We don't have people sign out. So we're sort of estimating about 2 to 3 hours for anyone that comes. And that's usually pretty accurate. But hopefully that answers your question. That's typically how long an event is. And we do track the hours, but it's somewhat.
Exactly. Estimated. Thank you. That's exactly. Any other questions here? We've got Lisa at our beck and call here for answering questions tonight. So
I have a question, Joan and Lisa. What is involved in learning how to be a lead steward or a steward? What's the training like?
Yeah, well, you learn a little bit about some very basics just about safety, which is one of the first things that we want to teach people. So things that you might not even think about, because often if you're at your home and you might be working outside, you're typically alone, so you don't have to worry about hitting someone with a shovel as you shovel backwards. Often these can get pretty big and you don't realize there's somebody beside you. So safety is one, and making sure that people take a break when they need to take a break and all that stuff. Then, how to actually plant a tree if we're talking about tree planting. So some people aren't familiar with that. And we always do a little bit of a training for all the volunteers at the site. But the idea is that the lead steward is doing that training when you host the volunteer event, so you're taking out the plant, you're breaking up the roots, how big to dig the hole, make the hole wider than it is deep, all that kind of stuff. So how to plant a tree. We'll also spend a little bit of time training them on invasive species removal. So being able to identify some common invasive species, such as English ivy or archangel or blackberry. Obviously, we typically don't have, they have to be pretty hardy volunteers to take out blackberry. Usually we don't have volunteers doing that, but and then making sure that the volunteers are prepared, know what do they need to host a work party. So what tools do they need? Setting up the event. There's actually an online platform that we use and registration. So there's a variety of things. It's not too extensive, but there is a little bit of little bit of information that passing that needs to happen in order to really be able to hold a successful event.
Is it like 6 hours or 8 hours or?
Oh, training. Oh, no, it's not that long. It's probably, and gosh, this is one I should have asked for Tara about because they do the training. It's probably just at most 2 hours. I think is usually what they are.
Oh,
And typically now we're doing sort of half virtual and then half in the field. And sometimes the field training is literally just show up an hour early for the volunteer event and we'll train you then.
So is the tree steward leader responsible for snacks?
Yes, you have to bring amazing snacks. That is the key to success. I think that's a great, they're not responsible, but if they're able to bring some snacks, that always helps. That was planning 101 when I was in school. People will come to a meeting if you have food, although now things are a little different for meetings, right?
Let's see, there's in the chat is a question. There's some remarks too about the good work that's happening here, Lisa, and I want to be sure that you get a chance to see or hear those comments or praise statements coming to you. But there's is it Kels? Did you want to unmute Kels? And anyway, the question here is, how can we promote this program with the city government? Sometimes it's hard to disrupt the status quo. It seems like city governments are used to doing things a certain way and are resistant to urban forestry projects. I know one of the things we've been talking about in League is promoting it among the cities and trying to develop a tree canopy policy citywide across the county and encouraging cities to embrace that. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure. Well, I think that's a great question, and I love that you're already thinking about how do we promote it and expand it. I think there's, you can already say, at least in Snohomish County, that the county is a member, and Everett is also a member. So there's a Green Everett program that's been established for a few years before the county joined in. I think, if the league wanted to approach cities, there's a lot of just success. The Forterra has had so much success with these programs in King County. I mean, just from the most basic, if you want to feel like you want to get out and feel like you've done something for your community, and this is something that interests you, you walk away with just as an individual a real sense of accomplishment and contribution to your community. It's fun, and then from the city perspective, they have a responsibility to maintain their city property and their city parks. So the county has chosen to start with 10 pilot sites that are county-owned sites, that are county-owned parks, and that way you're not having to deal with issues of working on property that you don't own. It's a great way, I think, sort of a great stepping stone and a great way to test out the program and have some success with really, really no risk. This is a really a win-win for everybody. And I think, we know that there's a lot of community support. So, and I guess the third thing I will say is that when I started at the county, I actually started as a temporary employee to oversee our energy efficiency and conservation block grant from the federal government. That was under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And we are slated to see that same rollout of funds under the Biden administration, probably here in the next year, to, as part of a way to address racial and social equity and climate change, really thinking about natural capital as an asset that has multiple co-benefits. It addresses stormwater, it addresses equitable access, especially if you're, making sure that parks in more vulnerable communities are addressed first in terms of maintenance, so that they can be enjoyed. Carbon sequestration. So I think, there's another pitch there with, we're going to see this, we are expecting to see a similar package to address energy efficiency, conservation, and natural capital is in that bucket. So tree planting and forest health and maintenance in urban areas is what we anticipate to see in that, in that bigger funding package that will be passed down to cities and counties, most likely.
Valerie Rossman went to ask us the get real question here, where she says, are there grant funds available from the county to help defray the cost of a green city partnership? From the county, I'm not so sure, but there are grant funds out there, aren't there, Lisa, that they can be directed to?
Yeah, so we don't have any funds for your specific purpose, which is for the Green City Partnership. But there's actually a lot of different foundations out there, and one of which I could send you could send a link to, the Partners for Places Foundation, where a nonprofit can partner with a local city or county for a specific project. And then there are, I'm sure, other grant opportunities that could help defray the cost. But like I said, I think you could explore some of those. And then I'm, relatively optimistic that we'll see some money in Biden's sort of, green package that will roll down to cities and counties for a variety of different projects to help with climate change.
Ben Thompson, Lisa was mentioning too, with the funding of the Evergreen Community Act, that there were matching funds available, that if people, for example, if a city were willing to put $4,000 or $5,000 into, I think it has to be over 5,000, but $5,000 into a project, that they could apply to have that matched out of the Evergreen Community Act funds. So I think that we're finding money's coming available, as you were pointing out, that were not there before. And please look up that with the information that Ben gave us at the last Evergreen Tuesday for sure.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I'm not as familiar with the ins and outs of the Evergreen Communities Act, so that's good to know.
Linda Matthews, did you want to ask your question? Or unmute and ask, or do you want me to read it out? Hearing silence, I will ask the question. It says, are there any efforts from the county to educate property owners on the benefits of ridding their property of invasive species, or finding ways to save diseased trees?
So the county we do have the native plant program that is run out of our surface water management division, which is a great program to do just that, to help educate homeowners about native species, retaining trees and shrubs on their property, and helping them to pick native plants, obviously. We address this a little bit with the noxious weed program as well. So that's more of we're not typically not as much on private property though with the noxious weed program. That's typically addressing noxious weeds more so in the right-of-way, the county's right-of-way. And there is also the Lakewise program, which is also run out of our surface water management division. And it's really targeting folks that live on the lakes, but it addresses all different kinds of education for keeping the lake healthy. So it's about, not using pesticides and herbicides, or what is safe to use to protect the water quality. And then also talking about trees and shrubs and the importance of keeping those on the property for erosion control and water quality treatment, helping with habitat, things like that.
Kate Lunsford filled in what Ben had said last week, that the DNR has grants for $5,000 to $40,000 in one-to-one matches. But if it is for a vulnerable population in some area where it really is considered sort of an environmental desert, so to speak, then the grant is 2-to-1. In other words, the state will match the Evergreen Community Act will find ways to match it 2-to-1. So they are really trying to promote that green space that Forterra's been working on with the Green City program too. So I think together that could be quite important to us going forward here. Are there other questions here? Well, I'd like to just reiterate what I heard Bill Phipps and others say in the chat about what a great presentation this is. The Healthy Forest Project is a wonderful, wonderful tool, and the Green Cities is as well. And I hope it inspires people to go to their local city councils and say, how do we, plan for this and do this? And I take that enthusiasm that you projected tonight and carry it over to other places, I think is what we need happening. Next up, I'd like to invite Kate Lunsford, who is the leader of our program of work 2021, adopted by the Natural Resources Committee this last annual meeting, to speak to us of a few things that we've discovered. And she's also the recent past president of the League of Women Voters of Snohomish County. She's going to share some highlights out of our program of work, which is entitled Becoming an Evergreen Community. And it's a tree canopy campaign. And also the discovery of a valued online resource that we actually learned about through a visit from the American Forest. It's called the Tree Equity Tool. And she's going to talk to you a little bit more about that. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Joan. There are wonderful new efforts, and I think there seems to be not only a growing awakening, but an urgency about the very important rebalancing, I hope, that our government is going to accept and promote. And both Forterra and the DNR have stated how very important it is to save existing trees on private and public property. And I was really thrilled to see that Forterra has published it last year, a major report on tree retention on private property. And they are, and Ben Thompson also in his remarks to us made the comments about saving significant trees and about helping developers understand that there needs to be some give and take in how developments are permitted. That's going to make room for significant trees, because they can't be replaced with the planting of tiny trees. And one of the things Forterra said was about private property is the expectation that we will be embracing innovative development that retains trees through creative articulations and construction. That's part of their executive overview in their report. But we also have begun in part of our tree campaign a partnership with the city of Everett, as Forterra has. But we jumped in with the Delta neighborhood to ask if we could assist in their plans that have been ongoing for a couple of years about planting trees. And they are a vulnerable population. And once we heard about the tree equity score, we looked up the Delta neighborhood on this wonderful tool that measures just very quickly. It's if you zoom in on the neighborhood, you can get the actual measurements in that neighborhood for existing tree canopy, population density, income, employment, surface temperature, race, age, and health. And so they get, and then they compile a score, and we use that information from the tree equity score to apply for a grant from the Jackson or the Henry M. Jackson Foundation Opportunity Grant, and got $4,000 to buy trees to plant in the Delta neighborhood. So these are all coming together kind of efforts that I think we can build one on the other to create the kind of momentum we need to get our county council and our city governments on board with supporting this kind of reimagining of how we're going to deal with the growth that's coming into Snohomish County. I think that's if anybody has any questions about that. We are going to try and make a film about our tree project. Hopefully that we can take on the road and sell it to anybody, not sell it, but present it to anybody that wants to hear it in the community, and begin conversations with the stakeholders, because I know that it's going to be a difficult conversation when you start talking about property rights and growth and housing and all of the very difficult topics that we'll need to sit down and talk about. And but we're running out of time and we're running out of trees. So I hope that we will that we as an organization, the League, and all of the environmental groups in Snohomish County will leverage their voices and help our government prioritize trees in our community.
Thank you, Kate.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, do we have questions for Kate about this particular model program? This is working directly with a neighborhood group that will, and the city of Everett and Forterra as well, but it started with the neighborhood group, and it will involve private property owners taking stewardship of the trees that are going to be planted. So that watering factor and looking after factor that Lisa talked about for the newly planted is going to be falling on the people that are going to have the trees in their yards, so to speak. So it'll encourage that kind of ownership of the actual tree, and it'll make it seem even more important to them. So, and I want to reiterate what Ben said, Kate said tonight, and I think I heard Lisa saying we've talked about the importance of trees, but Ben really pushed for the fact that tree preservation is key. And even though we plant the younger trees, the older trees that have been working and doing the work know how to do it, and they do it well. And they're experts, and we need to retain them to keep our canopy strong. And it says this. So that whole idea is one that needs to be restated over and over again as we develop in an urban area. So any other questions for Kate on this particular model? Well then, thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Lisa, as our guest tonight. These model efforts to address the climate change crisis are really a positive step forward. Thank you, Kate, for leading our tree canopy campaign. Your enthusiasm and energy are remarkable. I would also like to express appreciation to the Natural Resource Committee members, many of whom are here tonight, who took part in putting together this speaker series of Evergreen Tuesdays. Linda Matthews, our tech support extraordinaire, Julie Winchell, Sarah Blake, as well as Carol McMahon. Most of all, thank you all who attended tonight. Please, please spread the word of what you learned this evening. You are the community leaders. Join us as part of the Natural Resources Committee of the League of Women Voters to keep on learning more. We meet the third Friday of the month by Zoom at 10 a.m. And our next meeting, we will host the biologist Joe Scardino, champion of the Edmonds Marsh. And in December, Keith Stalker is going to come and talk about tree farms. And he's situated out there in Snohomish. So you're welcome. Please come. Please keep learning. And remember,
Joan, do you want to put your, I'm wondering how people can find a link to our meetings. Do you want to put your email in the chat?
well, I mean, we're obviously at the league website. So anybody who wants to get information to us or to me can reach us under the Natural Resource Committee at the league website. So I will put my
lwvsnoho.org. That's right. Thank you, Jean.
So,
and we'll respond and get a link to you if you want to come to hear any of the Natural Resources Committee meetings.
So just let me know and I will send you the link for the meeting. So remember, plan for trees, preserve them, plant them, and protect them. Be evergreen. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.